Good afternoon and welcome to our workshop. My name is Marga Marshall and I'm part of CABE's team. Today, I, along with my colleague Carmen Garces, will be supporting you with any questions and monitoring the chat throughout our session. I will also be the session's timekeeper, so I'll do a little verbal reminder when our time is coming to an end. I'm excited now to introduce our presenters, Alicia Raygoza and Priscilla Figueroa. Thank you all and have a wonderful session. Go ahead, all yours.
Oh, thank you. Welcome, everybody. We are so happy to see you. As I like to tell people, welcome to our party. I am Priscilla Figueroa from the Mountain View School District. I am the Director of Family Engagement, Extended Learning, and Migrant Education. And with me, I have
Alicia Raygoza, Mountain View School District Curriculum and Instruction, TOSA, and Migrant Education Family Biliteracy teacher.
Okay, and we are so happy to be here today to present to you our Migrant Education Family Biliteracy program. We hope to really share with you how our program got started, some of the strategies that we have used to work with our families, and answer any questions that you may have, especially about maybe starting something like this at your site or adding to your existing programs. So we're going to start very quickly with our program goals.
Oh.
Next slide, Alicia.
Oh, actually,
no, we're stuck.
Not quite yet.
So, okay. No, go back one. Oh, this is our.
This is the, yes.
Okay, sorry. So as we start our program, one of the things we really want to look at or wanted to do was make sure that our parents were able to work with their children together and really start to think about the assets that are built around being bilingual. So we're going to start off with an activity that we actually had our parents also do. Next. Okay, so I would love you to think about what being bilingual is like. And this is a strategy. So I need to do a disclaimer. We have used many strategies through many incredible trainings that we have had through our district. We are a SEAL district, so we have had incredible trainings through SEAL and bilingual convenings, along with other partnerships that we've had with other universities. So many of these strategies come from many different places, and we have adapted them to work with our program. So I don't want to get this strategy wrong. So Alicia, I want to say it's Escamilla.
This strategy is a strategy we learned from Silvia Dorta Duque de Reyes. We had the pleasure of hosting at our district for a bilingual workshop for our teachers.
Yes, thank you. So I'd like you to think of what being bilingual is like for you. In my case, being bilingual, if I just look at these images, being bilingual for me is like a compass. For me, being bilingual has always been my North Star. It is what always points me in the right direction, because being bilingual is synonymous with who I am. It is what I guess what always makes me keep my beat. I always come back to being who I am in my culture, and being bilingual is a huge part of my culture. So I'd like to welcome you to think about, how would you finish this sentence? Being bilingual is like choosing one of these images that you see. What would you think being bilingual is like? And we'd like to invite you to type it into the chat. Please feel free to use any of the language frames that are up above. And please feel free to use whichever language you would like to use, whichever language you are stronger in, or whichever language you feel like using right now.
And this was a strategy we used at the beginning of our class to focus our families on the importance of being bilingual. So we wanted to share that with you.
Okay, so looking at the chat, I can't get a clear sight of it right now. Alicia, can you?
I can. I have a comment here that says, ser bilingüe es como una paleta de pintura. Puedes combinar palabras bellas de los dos idiomas para comunicar tus sentimientos.
Oh, beautiful.
Sharing, Billy. And
Let's
then
share one more.
someone else said, being bilingual is like a book. It tells the story of my past, present, and future. Thank you for sharing, Amber.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so doing something like this, you can see how powerful it would be for both all our families, both parents and student, really allowing them an opportunity to come together and really think about what does it mean to be bilingual. Okay, so moving on. So our program basically came about, we wanted to make sure that we engaged our middle school and our elementary school students and their parents in activities that would really work around maintaining and growing their primary language and really honoring their culture and strengthening those family connections across generations. So this program really came out of Migrant Education was a new program to our district as of last year. We had participated in a consortium prior to this, but for last year was the first year we brought it completely within house, within the district. So one of the programs we wanted to work with was an existing program that we had in our district called Family Biliteracy, which really targets students kinder through third grade. And this was done in partnership with Dr. Fernando Rodriguez Valls from Cal State Fullerton. That was brought in, and one of the things with migrant education, you always talk to your parents, you always bring in your parents, and you explain the programs that are built into your program. And one of the questions that came up from many parents was they were wondering if something like this could exist beyond the third grade. There appeared to be a bit of a disconnect with the families and their middle school students. They were really saying that their students were coming, they no longer wanted to speak Spanish, or they no longer spoke Spanish with the family, or for whatever reasons, they did not particularly feel connected to the culture, and the families were reaching out for help. That also brought that in conjunction with our work with the EL roadmap really came up principle one. If we know the EL roadmap, principle one really talks about asset-oriented and needs-responsive schools. So we really wanted to build with our families the idea that our culture and our language is an asset that we bring. We are not working at a deficit because we may not know English or be English proficient, but instead we are truly working with assets that are going to just help us grow and become stronger in terms of our language proficiencies as well as our culture. That in conjunction with working with Sobrato Early Academic Language, or the SEAL model in our school, we really felt that we had the strategies already in place that we could build on and begin to bring them to work with upper grade students. So the next one.
So this is where we started to focus on our migrant education program at the middle school level, and we felt it was really critical to engage our students in a text that was available in both Spanish and English. And so Priscilla made a good choice to select The Circuit or Cajas de Cartón by Francisco Jimenez, which is a wonderful book about a migrant child and his family. And so we knew there would be that cultural connection that we wanted to provide them as we read through the text. And we knew that we would be able to incorporate some really wonderful reading comprehension strategies, and that there would be plenty of opportunities for discussion. And so
sorry to interrupt. Could you please get closer to your microphone? It's really hard to hear you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Here, let me just put that up. Thank you. Okay, can you hear me now? Better?
That's not much better.
Oh,
Actually, I hear you very well, so you may want to turn up your microphone, Paul.
okay.
No, I'm all the way up. One is very good. One is very hard to hear.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I will try my best. It's up as high as it'll go. Let me take a look here really quickly.
I can hear you very well.
That's okay. We could just keep going.
I'll keep going. Okay. So the first strategy that we wanted to employ with our families was the observation picture strategy. And this is a great strategy where you incorporate images to evoke thought and to elicit conversation with, we used it with our families. And so we used pictures of migrant workers in the fields to just get them in the mindset, to tap that background knowledge and to get them talking in both Spanish and English, to prime ourselves for reading the text. And then we thought, you know what, literature circles is a really great strategy at the middle school level to incorporate with our families, where they would have the opportunity to collaborate over reading, writing, and speaking tasks around the circuit. And so that was critical for us to incorporate. And then we also wanted to use the Así se dice strategy, which is a strategy developed by Kathy Escamilla and Sue Hopewell out of the University of Colorado. And we found it to be a really great strategy to use, where the students and parents work together to translate a part of the text and compare those translations with the other families and then with the author. So that's the strategy that we'll highlight from our middle school program. And before we did that, we wanted to incorporate these phrases from Silvia Dorta Duque de Reyes. Like I mentioned earlier, she came to our school district to provide some professional development. And I just love this. It really brings the importance of being bilingual out. And so we stated this before we did our Así se dice strategy. We said, soy bilingüe. Yo pienso, hablo, escribo y leo en español y en inglés. Uso lo que ya sé en español para aprender en inglés. And then we said in English, I am bilingual. I think, speak, write, and read in Spanish and in English. I use what I know in English to learn in Spanish. So we wanted our families to be aware that the knowledge they brought from both languages, they could use in order to learn and comprehend. So we wanted to make that very clear. So the Así se dice strategy, the way we employed it was, we used it almost right away, day 2. We'd read chapter 1 the first day, and we practiced learning to use literature circles. And then we started our second day by reading this paragraph, the very first one from the first chapter in the text that sets the tone for Panchito's family's journey to America. The second part of that incorporates sharing partner thoughts. And at this point, then our families are able to talk over what they've read and then translate the paragraph together and compare it with other families. And then we talked about how our responses were the same or different. So you'll see here, there's an example of a couple of our families working through the strategy.
A menudo escuchaba cuando siendo niño vivía allá en México en un rancho llamado el Rancho Blanco.
Clavado. Entre lomas secas.
So you can hear the collaboration between the family members as they're reading through the text in Spanish. And the parents take the role of the teacher on initially. You can hear that in their interactions. And as they go through and talk about their thoughts and start to do their translation, you'll see that it can kind of shift over to where the kids start to take over if they have their strength more in English. So it becomes a time for them to make approximations and develop that translation. And then we have the opportunity to go around in carousel and look at other families' translations and then come back to our own to make modifications. And then our families produced their final product. And so this was the response of our family here that said, the border is a word that I'd heard lots of times when I was a child. I lived in Mexico in a ranch called the White Ranch, between Lomas Secas and Bald, lots of miles of North Guadalajara. I heard for the first time at the end of 40 years ago when Mom and Dad told me and Roberto, my older brother, that one day we were going to a big trip at North, cross the border, enter California, and leave behind Poor Life Forever. So this is a great formative assessment for me as the teacher. And you can see where there would be opportunities for instruction with vocabulary, language, grammar, but then also for meaning and comprehension. And so it was a great thing to watch the families work together and see what their translations were. And then we looked at the author's translation to see what he had done. And so this is what the author wrote. He said, La Frontera is a word I often heard when I was a child living in El Rancho Blanco, a small village nestled on barren, dry hills several miles north of Guadalajara, Mexico. I heard it for the first time back in the late 1940s when Papa and Mama told me and Roberto, my older brother, that someday we would take a long trip north, cross La Frontera, enter California, and leave our poverty behind. And so what we noticed, and one thing I forgot to mention when we carouseled around and then shared out to the whole group our translations, we noticed that there's more than one way to say something, right? And so that was good to see because it was an opportunity to learn from each other. And then when we looked at the author's translation, we were able to see the type of vocabulary words that he'd selected. So rather than say between, he selected nestled, another way of saying between. And he chose to say barren dry hills as opposed to bald. So then we started talking about the different types of vocabulary that one might use, right, to describe and what kinds of images those evoke, and the word poverty and what that meant. We noticed that the author didn't translate some of the words to English, that he kept them in Spanish, La Frontera. And we talked about, well, maybe our families had said, well, when you think of La Frontera and you're coming north, it evokes hope, right? And a new beginning, an opportunity. And so maybe to have translated it to border would have taken a different meaning. And so we talked about that. We talked about how he kept El Rancho Blanco in Espanol, because this is where he grew up. And so it held probably special meaning for him. And that's how he knew of his childhood home. He didn't change Papa and Mama or Roberto into English because this is the identity they have. This is who they are. Right, so he wouldn't change that. So we had really rich conversation around our translations, and just working through the process gave the students an eye on the great assets that their families had, and the stories that they shared were really amazing. And the parents could see the strengths that their students had. So we tried to do this activity a couple of times as we read through the book together, and it was really powerful. We wanted to end with honoring our culture. And so at the end of his book, Francisco Jimenez talks about migrant workers. And he says that, their children's children give meaning to the phrase, the American dream. Your story is the story of the United States of America. And we wanted our families the opportunity to express their dreams for their families. And so we gave them poster board. We encouraged them to use pictures and write their dreams for their families. And so you can see one of our families sharing their dream board for their family here. And then we also had an opportunity to write I am bilingual poems that we shared and decorated. And it was just a beautiful night to really be proud of who we were. We read through this great story and were able to share our learning together. And so this gave impetus to our elementary school family biliteracy. Now we wanted to do it with our elementary school kids. And we had targeted this towards, Priscilla wanted to do like 4th and 5th grade. And then in speaking with Miss Josie, who is our wonderful migrant ed community liaison, we found there was interest for 3rd through 8th grade. And so we wanted to, again, provide them with books that we purchased for them to keep with those stories that were related to our cultures from Mexico, Central and South America. That would be relatable, but we also wanted to give a window into other cultures and their stories. And so we provided texts that would give us a window into other cultures. And we found these to be very relatable to our families. And then again, gave great opportunities for reading comprehension strategies and conversation. And so this one we felt was super important to acknowledge the importance of telling our stories. And Seal had developed this family workshop around the importance of telling our stories. And I thought it would be a great idea to incorporate into our class, especially since this book that they would use, Nana's Big Surprise or Nana Que Sorpresa, is written by Amada Irma Perez, who wrote this story about her experience coming across to the United States, and she settled in our community for a time in El Monte, California. And so we wanted our families to see that out of our community have grown authors, and that we also are authors. We focused also on the elements of story. Since we had a variety of different stories we were sharing with them, we wanted to make sure that we highlighted that through doing a sort of story function wall where we would talk about those elements of story and their purpose, and then highlight that every culture has its stories and that there are common themes across the globe. And finally, we wanted to practice at the end, we wanted to write I am from poems as another way of telling our story about ourselves and where we're from, where the students and parents would work together to create a poem. And this is again a strategy developed by Kathy Escamilla and Sue Hopewell. And Seal then further developed it for their return to school kids and employed the use of the book De Donde Eres, which is a beautiful book we'll share in a little bit. And so part of this quote that we wanted to share with them from the workshop was that family stories can be told nearly anywhere. They cost us only our time, our memories, our creativity. They can inspire us, protect us, and bind us to others. So be generous with your stories and be generous in your stories. Remember that your children may have them for a lifetime. And so what we did was we had our parents recall a story from their childhood and tell it to their children in detail. And we wanted to make sure that there was plenty of detail because the children then were going to illustrate, provide an illustration that went with the story. And we would have our parents, our families share at the beginning of each week a different story from their childhood. And we found that some of our stories were similar and we were excited to learn other stories that we hadn't heard before. And one thing we made sure to do was purchase journals for them that they could write these stories in, but also continue to add to. And so it was really a wonderful time for them to share their stories as a family. So this was the literature that we'd selected. You can see here that we had stories that would relate to ourselves, legends, trickster tales, fables, and fairy tales. And we had to make sure that they were, again, like the circuit and Cajas de Cartón, that they were bilingual because we wanted the opportunity to read in both languages and discuss in both languages. And so what happened, we started this class in February 2020. We met 2 times in person and then COVID hit. So we had to close down, but we were able to offer it again in the fall virtually. And what started out as a 3rd through 8th grade ended up being the whole family that joined together to listen in on the stories and read together. So that was the beauty of what came out of having to restart. We had TK all the way to high school participating with us during this time. And so we used thinking maps to tap our prior knowledge and tell what we knew about the stories we were going to read each week. And we were able to respond in both languages. We would set it up where I would drop the stories on slides, but they also had the book at home so they could read from the text they had. We gave them some focus questions for comprehension that we would focus on while we were popcorn reading the story out, which was a whole lot of fun. And then we went into breakout groups and talked about those focus questions and the use of some graphic organizers to guide our conversation. And then we came back together and shared out. And they really liked the breakout rooms. It was a lot of fun to just get that time to talk over these stories that we love so much. And then at the end, we would, if we had time, we would try to do an activity that was related to the literature that we were reading. And we would end with a story closing, a different one each time. Y aquí se acaba este cuento, como me lo contaron, te lo cuento. It was a lot of fun. And we wanted to give them a visual as we traveled through. So I don't know if you're aware of this website, but it's called StoryMap.js. And it's really great because you could create your own maps, upload your own pictures and explanations. And so, oops, let me go back. And this is what it looks like, just to give you a little bit of a preview. We got to travel the world with our stories, and that made it really fun for us. And so you can see here one of the anthologies we used that was all in Spanish, and we every week we added the picture of the new book, and it would take us to, here we are in the heart of Mexico, Mexico City, for The Princess and the Warrior. And then we moved a little north, went to El Cucuy. We read La Llorona, and this story we know all throughout Mexico, Central and Central America, Latin culture. And then we were meeting around the time of Day of the Dead. So we read El Espíritu de Tío Fernando. We made altares, we shared our family traditions. Okay. And then we got into our trickster tales. We traveled down to Brazil to learn about Jabuti and how he got his shell. we came back to Guatemala and read a story in Spanish called Los Chom, which was also a trickster tale that we were able to compare. And then we went across to Africa and introduced our families to Anansi, much loved trickster from Africa. And then we wanted to be sure that we read Aesop's Fables in English and Spanish and emphasize the importance of these short stories that were written in 620 BC, by a slave in Greece that are still impactful in our lives today. And it was fun knowing that, there was a moral to be learned at the end of the story or a lesson learned. And as we read, everybody could make a connection. Oh yeah, I remember that story. It was really nice. We did a Mexican Cinderella story that we compared with a traditional Cinderella story. And then we came back to our own stories. So we wanted our families to know that when we come back to our stories, this is where we exist and where we begin. And our stories tell who we are. So we wanted them to continue to tell their stories and to share this part of their family, part of their culture, but to also listen to the stories of others to learn what we have in common and what makes us unique and special. So this was a really great tool to give the visual to our families of where we were traveling with our stories. And so we come to our Where Are You From poems, De Donde Eres? And this, as I mentioned, right, is a strategy that we use where we read the story. And then this story is a sweet story about a little girl who's at school, if you're unaware, and her classmates ask her where she's from. And her teacher even asks her, well, where are you from? And she tries to say, I'm from here. And no, where are you from? So I don't know if that's happened to you, but it has happened to me. And how that feels. So she goes to the wisest person she knows, her grandfather, her abuelo. And she asks him, Abuelo, well, where am I from? And so Priscilla is going to take you through and read a few of the pages so that you get a flavor for the story.
So where am I from? Abuelo thinks, his eyes squint like he's looking inside his heart for an answer. You come from the Pampas. I can't see it now. The open, free land, he says. But Abuelo, where am I really from? Abuelo laughs. You want a place? He points to his heart. You're from here, from my love and the love of all those before you. So that was a synopsis of it, really. We took some key pages just so you can get an idea of the way the book goes. But just really thinking, we'd like for you to start to begin to think, where are you from? Where does your heart tell you you are from? And with the students, we asked the students to create, the families actually, to create poems, 4 stanza poems that reflect the pattern in the book, where they would talk about, I am from in a familiar place, I am from the food that you enjoy, and I am from the expressions, and I am from the people you love, everything that really envelops the assets of our culture. And they created, the families created these poems. So here we're giving you 2 examples to show you what some of our families came up with. So our families went through, and they talked about where they were from, and this particular family went ahead and added graphics to their slide. Just to read you one, soy de San Francisco, soy de pozole, soy de clean up, soy de mi padrino. And then another family shared theirs, and this is the familia Buiza. Soy de un lugar muy pequeño, El Salvador. Soy de donde hacemos muchas pupusas. Soy de, ya siéntate que te vas a caer. Soy de Concepción, Tomás, mis abuelos. I'd like to read the next one to you just because it clicks to the first one. Soy de, y también de los Estados Unidos. Soy de donde cocinamos con leña. Soy de, ves, te dije que te sentaras, pero no hiciste caso y te caíste. Y soy de mis papás, Rosa y Carlos. So you can see that everybody put their spin on it, and they created their 4 stanza poems. So we'd love for you to take a minute, maybe on a piece of paper, if you can think of how would you write your first stanza. You can do it in English, in Spanish, you can do it in your language if it differs from those two. And really think of, I am from, what would be a place? And I am from, what food might you enjoy? The expressions you might hear at home and some of the people you love. We'd love for you to jot it down. And then we're going to ask you to write it in the chat, but don't hit enter. I would say as you write it, don't worry about form, just let it all run through and then hit enter when all four lines are completed. That way we don't break up your particular stanza.
And while they're thinking on and working on this awesome activity, I just wanted to give you guys a reminder, 9 minutes left. Thank you.
So as soon as you have all four of your lines together, you can hit enter and it'll populate the chat with your stanza. And in the interest for allowing time for some questions, we might ask you to finish this up in 1 minute. So if you're only able to get 2 lines in, that's fine.
And if you'd like to just write it down on the paper and raise your hand to share, we would love to call on you to share as well.
Okay, so I could see that somebody put in, soy de los Estados Unidos. Soy de mi mamá, soy de un bello pueblito. Soy de Guadalajara, soy de tamales y chiles rellenos. Soy te dije que te ibas a caer. Soy de mi mamá. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I am from the little brown house on Jennifer Avenue. I am from curried broccoli casserole. I am from family first. I am from my little California family. Thank you. That's beautiful. I am from Live Oak Park on Saturday mornings. I am from, oops, it moved. Where am I? Ah, it moved again. Oh, I am from Burritos de Frijoles con Queso. I am from Cuídate Mucho. And I lost the last one. I am from Mama y Papi. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. I really want to reiterate the power in allowing and bringing your families together in a safe space where they are able to come together and share through literature the great things about them, the assets that they really bring, and really allowing them to wrap their heads around their culture, their language as an asset. You know, we are coming out of a time where our families really saw it as a deficit. Our students saw it as a deficit. Many of our junior high students were kindergartners under a mindset of, I must become English proficient in order to reach the promised land. And they kind of left behind, you know, they kind of thought that they needed to leave behind that rich language that they learned from birth, and really providing our families an opportunity and a context by which to develop this asset-oriented mindset is very, very powerful. One thing we heard from many of our families was, I really enjoyed this time because it gave me this time to come together with my child and talk about these things, because we never talked about it. They shared their stories about their names. That was amazing. When you actually saw kids their mouths were open, dropped to the floor, when their parents actually told them there was a story behind their name. So providing that context, whether it be done through a program or whether it be done through a family literacy night or just a series of nights that you might be able to create within your classroom or within your school, it is well worth it because the mindset and the shift that happens for the students is absolutely remarkable.
Yeah,
So
and I
with
can see real quick, Priscilla, in the chat there, your beautiful 4 stanza soy de I am from poems speak to, you know, your heart, right? El corazón. And I just wanted to say that this is the way that we ended our class, you know, familias, honoring our culture through story and poetry, honoring where we are from, expressed in the languages that are ours. And it was just such a beautiful experience. It was really wonderful.
Okay, so I did see a couple of questions in the chat early on. One of them asked about timeline. So our timeline, this program was done as a 6-week program, 2 days a week. And when it was in person, we had to shift and work. Alicia was amazing with working with her time and changing the time for parents to be able to rush home, cook dinner, and then come on in. And then this was one of those places where when it went virtual, it was kind of like a blessing because we had many more parents join in. We had a cap of 15 parents. So there should have been 15 screens, 15 little boxes, but those boxes started to fill up, as Alicia had said, with students from kinder all the way through high school. Now we're not a high school district, but the families, their kids started joining in. I guess, you know, their high schooler was watching them all have fun and talk and share stories, and their high schooler joined in. So we had families really saying how grateful they were for that type of opportunity because it helped they felt closer to their high schooler in being able to do things like this. Let me
Do
see.
you have any other questions?
Maybe you can unmute and ask. We have like 3 minutes.
If anybody has any questions. And I have to say this was, we had from our, like I mentioned, Josie Aguiniga, our community liaison was great contacting our migrant ed families to join, and Alicia Garcia, our family engagement TOSA, they jumped into my class too and helped with the breakout groups. It was a great team effort.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I'm a preschool teacher and I am using SEAL.
Yes.
We love that. We love it because the parents are participating and I think they enjoy it. They enjoy it. It's so much, I can say, happiness to see how the parents are participating with the kids. Right now we are doing insects. So it's amazing to see how the parents go outside and look for the insect with the kids, and they really enjoy it. You can see on the parents how happy they are when they're doing all these activities. And it's something that they never did it before, and it's something that they really, really enjoy. So it's a great program. Even though I'm doing it with preschool kids, it is amazing. It is amazing because we involve the whole family, no solamente los niños, but toda la familia.
So I have a quick question. How do parents sign up to participate? Is this a classroom or is this an after school activity?
Great question. It's an after school activity that our family engagement, maybe Priscilla, you would like to speak to this.
Yes, migrant education is an after school supplemental program, but even our family biliteracy program that we have that's non-migrant education, they are after school programs, and migrant education has a liaison, and the liaison actively recruits. We put out flyers and she actively recruits the families to join in. This is one of those few programs that we are probably thinking will remain virtual just because it has blossomed much more popularly, if that's a word. It has a lot more popularity amongst our families as a virtual program, just because of time and convenience.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat, but from Jennifer that says, how could you modify this to accommodate more than just Spanish speaking families? I think you could totally modify it by the literature that you select. And then by involving the families. Say if you have another language, whether it be Mandarin or Vietnamese or Arabic, I would invite the families to come to help if there's an opportunity for someone to help plan, and look for the vendors that might provide some of those books in the language that you're trying to teach the class in. Definitely, you might be able to find some vendors that would have literature you can incorporate.
We actually do have a family biliteracy program that's running right now, kinder through first grade, with a Mandarin, that is a Mandarin program. And that one, we have also a liaison who has recruited throughout the district and brought together our Mandarin and Cantonese families, and they work around dual language text in Mandarin. And that's also been a very popular program for us for that specific population. But you could definitely try to broaden it in a more of a family biliteracy type activity, where if you just use text that really speaks to the heart and can be cross-cultural, to allow families the opportunity to talk to each other in their native language, and discuss the literature and produce a poem, such as like the Where Are You From?
These are amazing conversations and questions. It's really, really wonderful. It is past 6:20, 6:22. We would like to thank everybody for joining us on day 4 on CABE's 2021 first virtual conference. We will now take an 8-minute break before you enter into the closing session. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow on our last day. Thank you so much, Alicia Raygoza. Thank you so much, Priscilla Figueroa, for a fantastic presentation. You all have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank
Too. Have a
you.
good
Thank you.
evening. Thank you for
Bye-bye.
coming. Good night.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.